Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. I'm going to be starting a new little opening video series, I guess, on a different kind of F5 setup. It's not the Dutch this time, it's going to be against an E4 opening, surprisingly. You're wondering how does, F5 make sense at all against, this E4 move. But, if you play E5, or if you, play it at some time, I have a good suggestion against knight f3, knight c6, this bishop b5 move. We have the Schliemann gambit. This is not that bad for black, believe it or not. I mean, you can, at first this looks kind of terrible, but, if you take a look at it from another perspective, it almost looks like let's say a Vienna game, but with reverse colors. So let's say if I reverse, roles here, and let's say if I change the move order, this kind of bishop b4 move didn't really make sense. If I, think about it in reverse colors, this bishop b4 move is not really what black wanted to play. He wanted to play bishop c5. And, this kind of is actually good for white, this kind of position. Or okay, I should say. But, going back, let's go back to this position. f5, you might think, this is not such a good move, but it actually is quite acceptable for black. Now, there are a lot of interesting moves here that white can play, and the two main lines are d3 and knight c3, and I think I'm going to be covering those in a future video, but for now I want to cover a few sidelines. They look somewhat normal or reasonable for white. And in this position with f5 played, kind of exposing these light squares, these three light squares, or the whole complex around here. White can open the center really, really quickly with d4, and I wouldn't take on d4 and I guess open the center really quickly. I think with the open center here and some really, really annoying weak squares everywhere, I don't think I like that for black. Against d4, it's kind of a theoretical line. You just got to play, this kind of move, f takes e4. And, if knight takes e4, then you can just take here, and this position perfectly fine. You have this idea of maybe even queen h4. But, something normal like bishop c5 or maybe c6 and this kind of stuff is quite okay. I think even c6 followed by queen a5 check gets you back the pawn on e5. So, that looks quite okay. So, instead of knight takes e5, white's going to probably just take here. And what you want to do normally is not take with the b pawn when, you're kind of left with this annoying knight here, and you can't really play d6 because the knight takes c6, and if you want to protect c6, I think white just doesn't care. And, he just continues developing normally. I don't know where to place this knight. Maybe knight here. And the problem with a position like this is that, it looks pretty okay, for black on the surface. It's just this kind of pawn majority is kind of hard to roll with. And, maybe instead of castles, maybe white can even consider f3 at some point. Maybe not here, though. And, if black wants to play d5, this e5 square is going to become really weak, and if he doesn't play d5, it's not really clear what he's going to do. So I wouldn't take with the b pawn really. I would just take like that, and if knight takes, then continuing normally with knight f6, bishop d6, c5, trying to undermine the point here, and this kind of position. Maybe instead of that, maybe f3 first, and maybe not knight f6 first. Maybe just bishop d6. Yeah, maybe this one first. Sorry about that. I mean, this kind of position is quite okay for black. He's going to play c5, knight f6, and I think this is really, really okay. Although maybe knight f6 to prevent, you know what I mean. This kind of complex looks okay for black. Is you know, he has no development problems, and his structure actually, you know, kind of looks weak, but this pawn is actually really strong, and this kind of setup actually looks okay. Anyways, that's just me rambling on. So, I mean, that's basically, you know, d4. You ideally want to take here first, and you know, once he takes, you want to take with the d pawn, and you know, develop normally from there. That's not really a problem. So the other move is, another move that white can try is, you know, pawn takes pawn here, and this move has to be actually precisely played here. I think black should play e4 here, kind of moving the knight. And you know, if white wants to move, doesn't want to move his knight, if white wants to move his knight and go to a square like this, or maybe here, then he should probably just take here. You know, pawn takes pawn. Now I'm ready to push d5, by the way. And you know, this kind of position is maybe c5 first, and d5, and f5 is weak, and you know, this kind of position is almost like an outline with reverse colors. But I mean, f5 is going to drop, and you know, white doesn't want to play a move like that. That just looks terrible for white. No, honestly, like a terrible king's gambit for with reverse colors. Black already has a monstrous center there. Yeah, your idea is black is just to take a lot of space and get pawn back, and black doesn't really have any problems there. So you know, against this e4 move, normally, you know, white just plays queen e2, kind of pinning this. So now you can't take here because it's illegal. And here you don't want to play a move like d5, I think, and because white might try maybe knight d4, knight e6, and or maybe d3 at some point. Sorry about that. d3, you know, trying to take the pawn. Yeah, here you want to protect your pawn with your own queen here, and you know, white can't play knight e5 or knight d4, so he has to logically take there, and you can't really take the knight because if bishop takes f3 or queen takes there first, or, I mean, it's all pretty good for white except for that black can take with the b pawn here, and once white moves his knight, I think black is doing white fine. Sorry, d takes, knight d4, and now probably a move like queen e5 is necessary in this kind of position. Yeah, I mean, this followed by c5 at some point, and this kind of position looks alright for me, for black, really. You know, relying on this pin doesn't really get you anywhere. I don't think it does. And I mean, if this knight has to move, then you kind of have this idea of really, really nice development. And black is not doing bad at all. You know, maybe c5 is a move, but I only worry about this kind of move in turn. So you know, if we go back, I mean, this whole position is not a problem. So if you, let's say like white plays, you know, queen e2 is another move, but like we just said, but not queen e2, sorry. I meant, you know, we just covered that move. Another move that white can play is castles. And in this position, you know, black probably just wants to take here and kind of force this kind of position. And I think we actually might have covered this previously. It looks really similar to those other positions with, you know, really, really nice development. And, you know, d4, maybe even c5 at some point. I don't think this is much of a problem because I wonder. Looks like a really, really tricky line. G8. I didn't really cover this or think about it in return. Probably black has some compensation along, you know, this file. you know, there's probably some concrete tactic. I don't think white wants to go with this castling into this open file pawn storm and I don't know, knight f4, and you know, there's already this idea of rook g4 winning there. It actually probably is winning. Strange. Okay, maybe that does win. And you know, white won't play queen h5 in this kind of position. Maybe he'll just play like d4 and c5 and kind of break it up twice with your double c pawns eventually, and just continue developing normally. That's not really a bad thing for black either. So yeah, castling's not really a problem either. You know, another move that white can consider is just taking here, and you know, white doesn't really want to take here because black can take here too, but probably just queen d4, and this is really, really unpleasant to play, and I mean, white has to move the knight, and this is kind of a disaster, really. You know, either pawn takes or queen takes is fine for black. And kind of like we mentioned with this, I don't think this check is really a problem. Probably because of the same reason I'm thinking. With g8 and knight f4, and probably just rook g4, right? Winning the knight again. And even queen e4 first can be inserted with the king kind of stuck in the center. Although maybe white can play king d1 there, but still, I mean, rook g4 looks good. You know, but you know, white doesn't want to do that. Maybe after pawn takes pawn. I mean, white can also play this move, but I'm not so sure he's willing to do this under those kind of, maybe even e4 here, you know, kind of relying on this pin. And, you know, white doesn't really have a good spot for this knight, so he probably should pin this pawn. And I think we have a really, really similar kind of position as before, and this is actually a transposition, I think, into that other line with, you know, an early e takes f5. So, I mean, we already talked about that. That's fine for black. You know, we covered castles, so I guess the next move is queen e2, and you know, in this position, I think black should just take, and you know, black takes here, then you play this knight f6 move and gain a tempo, and I don't know, the queen has to go back, and probably bishop d6 and castles and this kind of stuff. Your bishop is kind of misplaced here in a way, since it's blocking the d pawn, but you can always just move it again after you use castle, and you know, that's fine. And if white tries to grab this pawn, I think you can, you know, get some serious compensation with, you know, a continuation like this. You know, relying on this check, and I think that one's the queen though. Strange. What? Oh, I think bishop e6. Sorry, queen d4. I was trying to remember this one line I looked at, and here you might get a position like this where you get the two bishops, but you're down a pawn. But you know, white has to solve this annoying pin, so maybe bishop c7. You know, planning to play knight d5 at some point, attacking the bishop, or maybe even knight h5, attacking the bishop and weakening the knight. And since white's queen is under attack, he might be, you know, tempted to play an exchange of queens like this. But this is kind of a tough position to play as white, since knight d3. Since knight d3 runs into probably just bishop b6. And I mean, white has some serious problems here. The knight has to move again. This is getting pretty uncomfortable, and it's kind of embarrassing that the knight's already lost here, and the knight can't go back here to defend its own pieces. I mean, after bishop b6, this position's really nice, but that's just a sample line. I mean, your opponent can play anything, but I think you know, this kind of line illustrates really nice points of black's position in your kind of plan. Yeah, just kind of remember this bishop d6 idea. You can also play bishop c5 and kind of get the same thing, but I prefer to, keep the bishop on d6, where, on d6 it kind of controls more of these important squares on the king side. But that's just my opinion. Maybe white wants to take here first, and you kind of get the same position. Bishop d6, and black's gonna probably play this move next turn, and if you don't grab, I mean, I don't know what else you do. I mean, castles, knight f6, and this queen has to move, and if this happens, I mean, I don't really see the point of white's setup, and I think this is actually a transposition to what I just said, so I don't think it's really much of a problem. Queen c4 though. Maybe knight d5. It's really strange. Really weird moves. But I think black's doing overall pretty well in this kind of complex. And I guess finally we can also kind of cover this bishop takes c6 move, and you just got to remember take by d pawn, kind of gaining good development for your pieces, as you've seen in a lot of lines already. And I think we've seen this e takes f5 idea and knight takes e5 idea, queen d4 after knight takes e5, and after f takes, knight takes f here, takes here, excuse me, and a move like e4, or even a developing move like bishop e6 black should be fine, but white may continue developing normally, knight c3, and here I'd really, I mean, you can kind of go for the same setup that I've already talked about with, takes here, and or maybe you want to go start off with knight f6. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference probably. And bishop d6, castles, and pretty nice development, honestly. I don't know. I mean, if white plays something slow here, I think black is already doing really well here. Bishop e4 attacking this, and this kind of pawn structure is pretty nice for black, I think. Although maybe he should probably keep the two bishops on somehow, since he has that. I mean, you can also play bishop c5 here, and ultimately be fine. Or bishop d6, protect the pawn. Maybe take here at some point and try to work with your open f file and d file. And these two squares are really nice, and give some kind of kingside attacking chances maybe later if white plans the castle over there. White rarely just plays these lines. He usually just goes with, d3. In a lot of games, I've seen d3, and I think white has a pretty decent position in these kind of positions. And in here, I'd probably recommend this knight f6, just knight f6 move, just continue developing. And I'm going to be talking about that in my next video. In addition, white also has probably the main move with knight here, and I think theory recommends knight f6, but there's one line with, I'm trying to remember, I'm sorry, not knight f6 first. I think it was just takes knight f6 in this position. Just trying to see why knight f6 wouldn't be a good move in this position. Maybe just take away. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, it's probably this one actually. And the idea, I think, is maybe a future queen e2 and d4. It's probably it. It's really similar to a Dutch opening. But yeah, I mean, knight c3, and usually black just takes here, and you kind of these two options of knight f6 and d5. I'm probably going to be talking about this d5 move, and I think a lot of theory books about this opening say that after takes here, takes here, black should play queen g5, but I like another move in this position, and it's kind of this queen d5 move, and I think this kind of gives black a pretty interesting position. And that's pretty much it for the Schliemann sidelines for now. It's not really that bad at first, but white has this. Probably the main moves are the best. Try for something against this opening. All right, guys. Tell me what you didn't like. I know the audio is not the best in the world, but I'm gonna get a new microphone soon, so I should be able to fix that. And I hope you guys like the stuff continuing. Thanks for watching.